know, and I mean, for a while there in the mid-'70s, the film started to be restored in England, but nobody knew about him. Nobody knew about him and Pressburger. They had no idea if they were alive. We had no idea if they were alive or dead. Because we were film students at the time also in the... Yeah.
All right, yes, me, okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that he should be recognized, and if so, why?
Well, it's interesting. The past, since 1977, there's been a resurgence and in a sense, a recognition amongst film lovers and archivists and, well, a lot of filmgoers actually around the world to Powell Pressburger films, Michael Powell, Emmett Pressburger. But what I think is so important about them was that they made films at a time when the type of picture they were making was almost impossible. They were in a very rare situation, kind of protected by J. Arthur Rank, and they were like a artists in residence, who were able to do these films that incorporated so much vitality and so much imagination and so much technical and artistic achievement that once they went out of sight, I'd say around 1960 or so, the films in England became very different. They became more naturalistic, more realistic. There was the British New Wave at the time, and their films were out of fashion. But what I think is important about Powell Pressburger is that when you see these pictures, you have to understand these men made these films because they had to make them, because they were burning to say these things, and to say these things in this manner. And that's what I always talk about. I mean, I remember a lot of guys talk about it, a lot of filmmakers talk about it, the fact that you have to want to make a film so bad that you'd kill to make it, that you'd fight to make it, and because you think it was that important to say. And that's what they did. And I think that goes for anything you want to do in life. I mean, any especially artistic endeavor. You have to want to write that book, or you have to want to sing that song, or write that song, or, you know, not to do it for money. They didn't do it for money. They didn't do it for. They didn't do it to become famous. They did it because they were burning to do this, and the purity of that passion comes through. And I think it's important for today, because very often today you see things that are passionless and cold, and to know that these things still exist, and they're just as beautiful as they were when they first were made, as realistic as they were, as naturalistic at times as they were. They were highly romantic, and they weren't ashamed about it. They were unabashed romanticists.
Sure they were.
Well, I mean, technically, the films today are much more superior, because technically you can see their effects. Effects are done that you can't tell how they're done. And these films, the old films, naturally you can see sometimes. You can see the seams, so to speak. But what they have to look for is, again, the passion. It's the idea that they felt so strongly about making certain films in their work that they would die for it. And that's the theme of The Red Shoes. He asks Maura Scherer, the impresario asks her, why do you want to dance? She says, why do you want to live? Like, that's a ridiculous question. What do you mean? I have nothing but dance. I have nothing but film. I have nothing but writing. You know, this is what's important. To have that passion, for anybody who's out there who wants to be a filmmaker or artist or whatever, to have that passion and follow it, but you have to follow it, and you may follow it into total ruin, which happened to Powell and Pressburger. It happened to them. They were completely anathema by 1961.
So is that a cautionary tale, so to speak?
It's not cautionary, because I think you have to follow it to the end, even if it means your demise, your own demise as an artist. You can't be afraid of it. You have to go for it.
Did they become outdated? Is that what
Outdated, and the war changed everything. After the war, the industry changed, and people weren't supposedly interested in the kind of films they wanted to make, and they started making deals outside of J. Arthur Rank with Selznick and with Alexander Korda, and it didn't work. The combination didn't work. They weren't allowed to really express themselves the way they wanted to, but they felt they had to keep working, and you could see a decline, you know, although they were incredibly, I mean, The Red Shoes was made in 1949, but that's J. Arthur Rank again, who protected them. You know, the British industry felt that The Red Shoes was a total disaster. They didn't want to release it, so they gave it in America. They played it in one theater in New York, and it became a huge hit. The Americans made that film a hit. By the way, Michael Powell and Emmett Pressburger signed their card together. It's the only ones in film history. It said written, produced, and directed by Michael Powell and Emmett Pressburger on the same card, every one of their films. And we always wondered who did what. you know. Of course, Pressburger turned out to be the major. He was the writer, and Powell was more the director. But they worked together, you know.
They were a team in the first
They were a team.